Hello, Year 11, and welcome to our first poetry video. This is I Look Into My Glass by Thomas Hardy. The first thing we'll do is read the poem through together, and then I would like you to pause it and have a go at reading it aloud yourself. So this is I Look Into My Glass by Thomas Hardy. I look into my glass and view my wasting skin, and say, would God it came to pass my heart had shrunk as thin. For then I, undistressed, by hearts grown cold to me, could lonely wait my endless rest with equanimity. But time to make me grieve, part steals, lets part abide, and shakes this fragile frame at eve with throbbings of noontide. Okay, now I'd like you to pause the video and read the poem aloud to yourself, focusing on pronunciation and the beat or the rhythm of the poem, and make sure that you follow the punctuation as well. So pause it now. Okay, welcome back. First, we will have an overview of the poem. If we'll move on to the next slide. There we go. So this poem, I Look Into My Glass, is all about the impact of time and how Thomas Hardy is aging, and the fact that the impact that time has on his identity and human identity in general. The theme you can see is the contrast between the speaker's age and physical body and his heart, which is still young and vibrant. So remember that the speaker is different to the poet. The speaker is the narrator in the poem. So there's a contrast between how his body is getting old, yet his heart still feels young. He's young at heart, but his body is failing him. The interesting thing about this poem is it was only written when he was 57. So he was only 57 years old when this was written, which really is not that old at all. It might seem it to you now, but 57 is not old, particularly not old enough to have written a poem like this. The tone is thoughtful and reflective. So he's reflecting back over his life, and he's reflecting back over his past relationships as well. And the pace, how fast or how slow the poem is read, is very slow. And it's thoughtful. Apart from the final two lines, and shakes this fragile frame at eve with throbbings of noontide, these last two lines are full of passion. Okay, we'll read the poem again, stanza by stanza, and I'd like you to make notes on your poem about the new vocabulary that we come across. So stanza 1. I look into my glass and view my wasting skin. Wasting means shriveled and withered. So here he's talking about the fact that his skin is full of wrinkles and it's like an old person in comparison to youthful skin. So pause it now and write what wasting means onto your poem. And say, would God it came to pass. Would God it came to pass means I wish it would happen. My heart had shrunk as thin. Shrunk is the past tense of shrink, which means to get smaller. So he's saying, I wish that my heart had shrunk like my body has. Okay, moving on to stanza 2. For then I, undistressed. Undistressed is an archaic or old-fashioned word, which means that you don't have any distress. So there's no mental suffering that the speaker has. By hearts grown cold to me, could lonely wait my endless rest with equanimity. Equanimity means composure or serenity. So to be very, very happy and serene and calm. Moving on to stanza 3. But time to make me grieve. Grieve is when you feel intense sorrow, often when someone dies. So if, let's say, your grandma dies, you will grieve for her. Part steals, let's part abide. Abide means to accept. So just to remind you that you should be writing all of these definitions onto the poem. And shakes this fragile frame at eve. In this poem, the word frame means his body. And so it means, and shakes this fragile body. And eve means the evening of his life or old age. So, and shakes this fragile body at the end of my life, with throbbings of noontide. Throbbings means to, well, it has two meanings. One is to beat with a strong and steady rhythm, like this. Also, it means to feel intense pain, and it's probably a mixture of the two here. Noontide, not moontide. Noontide means noon or midday. And in this poem, it means when he was in the prime of his life, so when he was younger. So you can see the comparison there between now when he's old and him looking back at his younger life. Okay, now some analysis of stanza 1. So we'll go back to stanza 1. I look into my glass and view my wasting skin and say, would God it came to pass, my heart had shrunk as thin. This stanza really focuses on the contrast between his wasting skin, you can see it here, wasting skin, and his emotions. As he says, would God it came to pass, my heart had shrunk as thin. He is wishing that his heart had shrunk as much as his body. So his body is getting smaller and weaker as he ages, but his heart is not. His heart is still as strong as ever. Yet, his old body is not strong enough to cope with his strong, romantic, emotional feelings. That's why he wishes that his heart had shrunk as well, because he's just not strong enough to deal with the emotions. In this stanza, you can really see the words which have connotations of age. So you can see wasting. We often say that old people waste away, or their skin wastes. Shrunk, when older people get smaller. And thin. Again, when people age, they often get thinner. A contrast in this stanza is made between the speaker's physical feelings, the fact that he's getting older, and his wasted skin, and his emotional feelings, what is in his heart. His body is weaker, yet his heart is just as strong. Okay, moving on to stanza 2. I suggest that at this point you pause it and make some notes about what I've just discussed. Okay, so stanza 2. For then I, undistressed by hearts grown cold to me, could lonely wait my endless rest with equanimity. Here, Hardy is implying that if his heart had grown cold, here, if his heart had grown cold, just like his body has grown weak, then he would be comfortable to await his death. However, his heart has not grown cold. His heart is still strong, he's still romantic, he's still full of emotion. Yet, he doesn't want to remember his past heartbreaks, his past romances that have failed, because his body is too weak to handle all those bad memories. And there is an obvious link to loneliness in this stanza. He talks about cold and he talks about lonely. So at this point in his life, Emma, his first wife, and him were still together, but they had become estranged, and he was interested in another woman, his second wife, Florence Henniker. However, Florence did not reciprocate, did not return his love. And this caused him, obviously, a lot of pain. And these one-way feelings are shown through the lines, "by hearts grown cold to me." So his love for Florence is not reciprocated, and Emma's love has grown cold for him. In the second stanza, he really does show and share his distress about growing old and about his past failed romances as well. Okay, I suggest again that you pause it here and you make some notes. Okay, moving on to stanza 3. But time to make me grieve, part steals, lets part abide, and shakes this fragile frame at eve with throbbings of noontide. You can see in the first 2 lines of this stanza and the second 2 lines of this stanza, sorry, there is a perfect symmetry. Symmetry, think back to maths, means that something is exactly the same, like the 2 sides of a butterfly. So you can see the perfect symmetry, the mirror images of these 2 lines and these 2 lines. And this emphasizes how there is a contrast between the function of time, the point of time. It, on one hand, part steals, yet on the other side, it is accepting. So it steals time from him, yet it accepts as well. Time is stealing Hardy's body, but on the other hand, it's letting his heart and emotions live on. So he's kind of in limbo. Now look at these 2 words here, eve and noontide. This is a metaphor which controls this poem, the contrast between eve and noontide. So noontide is his younger days when he was in his prime, and eve is now when he's in old age, literally the evening of his life. Although Hardy is old, he has the same emotions as he did when he was young. However, once again, his body cannot handle all of this emotion, so he isolates himself because he's struggling with his feelings. 1 minute. Okay, sorry, I have completely forgotten where I was, but we only have 30 seconds left. So moving on to the next slide. A roundup. A reminder that Hardy was only 57 years old when he wrote this. You can pause this now to look at the screen and read it. And he's both looking at himself in the mirror and painting in words an emotional self-portrait.